Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. And now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
A very good afternoon. Welcome to the Briefing PM, your fix of all the latest political news, debate and analysis here on GB News. I'm Darren McCaffrey, and coming up over the next hour, we'll have the latest from Ukraine as Russian forces continue their invasion of the country, with shelling heavily reported in many cities. We'll get the latest of what the situation is on the ground. Plus, we'll reflect back on PMQs, with the issue of sanctions against Russia dominate proceedings. We'll have the latest from a Tory and Labour MP. Plus, the SNP have caused controversy with comments linking the crisis in Ukraine to Scottish independence. We'll have the latest on that. And last night, US President Joe Biden held his State of the Union address. We'll speak to his former chief of staff about how this and his administration's response to the Ukraine crisis. As always, though, get in touch too. You can email me at gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at gbnews. All that and much more in the next hour between 3 and 4. But first, at the top of the hour, here's the news with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, it's just 1 minute past 3. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. The Prime Minister has told the Commons Russia's actions in Ukraine fully qualify as a war crime. Ahead of Prime Minister's questions, Ukraine's ambassador to the UK, who was watching proceedings, was welcomed with a standing ovation. Boris Johnson praised the country and its citizens for their resolve. He announced that the UK government will match up to £20 million of public donations to the Disaster Emergency Committee's Ukraine appeal. He also said he'd told President Volodymyr Zelensky that the UK will do everything it can to accelerate the delivery of weapons.
Putin has gravely miscalculated. In his abhorrent assault on a sovereign nation, he has underestimated the extraordinary fortitude of the Ukrainian people and the unity and resolve of the free world in standing up to his barbarism. The UN General Assembly will vote later today, and we call on every nation to join us in condemning Russia and demanding that Putin turn his tanks around.
In Ukraine, the State Emergency Service says more than 2,000 civilians have been killed since the start of the Russian invasion. Hundreds of structures, including transport facilities, hospitals, kindergartens and homes, have also been destroyed. The mayor of Kharkiv says the city is regularly being hit by rocket and airstrikes. Well, this morning, Volodymyr Zelensky said resistance has been strong and Russia, too, has suffered heavy losses.
Just think about this figure. Almost 6,000 Russians died, Russian servicemen, within 6 days of war. A figure without enemy's losses during the past night. 6,000. To receive what? To receive Ukraine? It is impossible. It will not happen with rockets. It will not happen with bombs, tanks, any strikes. We are on our land, and there will be an international tribunal to prosecute them for the war against us.
Thousands of Ukrainians have said they'll stay to fight and defend their country. That includes the MP, Kira Rudik.
We have enough of stuff and we are getting more and more supplies to be able to survive the siege. We understand that Putin has nothing that could stop him except for the bravery of Ukrainian people and the support of our international partners.
Ukrainians say Russian troops are deliberately destroying residential areas.
Many people in Ukraine, they are strong, they are not frightened, and they are ready to fight till the end, till the last drop of blood, if it will be needed.
And yesterday, Russia continued shelling the residential area, so deliberately destroying the houses, and they did it throughout the day and in the night as well. So people were not able to go out and were hiding in the shelters and the basements.
The humanitarian crisis is clearly growing. The UN's refugee agency says more than 874,000 people have fled Ukraine to neighbouring countries since the conflict began. Most of them have gone to Poland, which has taken in almost 500,000 refugees. The owner of the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline, which runs between Russia and Germany, has sacked all of its staff following US sanctions. The company is based in Switzerland. They say it hasn't filed for bankruptcy yet, but Reuters news agency sources suggest it could happen as soon as this week. Germany refused to grant the pipeline final approval after the Russian incursion. Let's take a quick look at other news now. A 15-year-old girl has been seriously injured in a shooting at a bus stop in Liverpool. Police responded to reports of gunfire in Toxteth just after 5 p.m. yesterday. The girl was taken to hospital and is in a stable condition. Police say it is a miracle she survived. Merseyside police say a 21-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder.
The actions of those people responsible for this attack on a 15-year-old schoolgirl who is waiting in a bus stop to go home from school are utterly appalling and shocking, even with 29 years service. It shows a total disregard and contempt that they have for the decent, honest, law-abiding people who live, work and visit this city.
In Australia, tens of thousands of people have fled their homes following warnings of extreme weather. 14 people have died since the worst floods on record hit both Queensland and New South Wales. Brisbane received 80% of its average annual rainfall in just a few days. Sydney is now bracing for torrential rain and flash floods. You're up to date on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head to Darren for this afternoon's briefing.
Thank you very much indeed, Rosie. It is nearly 7 minutes past 3 o'clock on this Wednesday afternoon. We're on TV, online and on your DAB digital radio. Thank you very much indeed for your company. Now, earlier today, we had, of course, Prime Minister's Question Time. It was dominated by the Russian invasion of Ukraine. However, the exchanges today between the Prime Minister and the Leader of Opposition were not the main talking points. Rather, it was, and I have to say I was in the press gallery looking down on what was a rather extraordinary moment, a unifying moment at the start of PMQs, when the House and all MPs stood united in applause for the Ukrainian ambassador. Let's have a look.
Finally, I want to welcome to our gallery the Ukraine ambassador.
You're right.
a rather extraordinary moment in the Commons earlier. Been going to PMQs for years and years, never seen quite anything like that. We will be looking back at some of the highlights of PMQs and talking to two MPs, Scott Benton and Catherine West, in a couple of minutes. But before that, we're on day 7 now of fighting in Ukraine, with officials there stating this afternoon that some 2,000 citizens have died so far in the conflict. It comes as Russia has ramped up the bombardment of multiple cities across Ukraine, with Russia saying it has captured the southern city of Kherson. However, this is disputed by the Ukrainian military, but heavy bombardment continuing, particularly in the second city, Kharkiv. Let's join now our Home Affairs and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, very good afternoon to you. It does feel that the level of attack from the Russian military has increased quite significantly in the last 24 hours or so.
Yeah, some very sobering and worrying developments across Ukraine today. The news that's coming out, of course, in the capital itself, things are quieter, but in some key areas, there is much more concerning news. A map of the region shows that Kharkiv in the northeast is surrounded now by Russian troops. They were fighting in Kharkiv, the second largest city in Ukraine, with Russian paratroopers engaged in fighting in the city itself overnight. We're told it is still under the control of the Ukrainians. Mariupol, down in on the Black Sea there, that crucial seaport, again surrounded by Russian forces and the scene of intense fighting. And Kherson, another city strategically placed just north of Crimea, and it is surrounded and the scene again of fierce fighting in recent days. In Kharkiv itself, there were images that came out today showing missile strikes on the National University and Police Headquarters, which is just across the street in the city centre from the university. A scene of utter devastation there, again echoed the images we had yesterday when the main administrative headquarters was struck. And we're told by the authorities that dozens have died in Kharkiv in recent hours because of a relentless bombardment. Other images showing the level of destruction in this city of more than 1.5 million people. It came under very sustained attack overnight. That attack has continued throughout the day, and as I say, it is now surrounded on all sides by Russian forces who are trying to push their way towards the city at night. Now, it may be that their overall game plan is to try to keep that area surrounded. It would be along the lines of the Russian military game plan, to put cities under siege and then to bombard them, to pummel the residents into surrender, into capitulation. In Kherson as well, which is that southern city, strategically placed. There are Russian troops on the ground with authenticated images that have come out of Kherson showing those Russian forces, but gingerly walking about and not in massive numbers, which again would seem to chime with what the authorities in Kherson are saying, which is that there may be Russian forces surrounding the area and trying to push into the city, but they don't have control of Kherson at this time. Zhytomyr is a city west of Kiev, about 50 miles west. A residential area there has been obliterated by Russian missiles and artillery shells in recent hours. This is near a main airbase. It may be that the target was that airbase, but the Ukrainian authorities say absolutely not, that at the end of the day, just look across the country at all of the residential areas that have been struck, and you know, according to them, that the Russians are indiscriminate in who they are attacking. And all of the while, the refugees are spilling over the border from Ukraine into more friendly countries, mainly NATO's Baltic states. 450,000 into Poland, another 100,000 at least into Romania, others into Slovakia, Hungary, and other neighbouring countries.
OK, Mark White, thank you very much indeed for the very latest. And Mark, of course, will be here throughout the day, as he has been, bringing you up to date with the latest from inside Ukraine about what is happening there. Let's go to Westminster now and speak to the Conservative MP Scott Benton and Labour's Catherine West. Thank you so much indeed for both for joining us. Scott, just you first, listening to Mark there, looking at the images online. We're a week into almost this war now. What are your thoughts and feelings when you see those images?
Well, I think it's clear that President Putin is not having everything his own way. Certainly the feedback I'm receiving from ministers and the press more generally is that he has encountered opposition on a scale he quite simply did not anticipate, not just within Ukraine itself and the fantastic and resilient response of that proud nation, but more broadly internationally across Europe as well. I don't think President Putin counted on nations like Germany taking the steps they have, and the EU and the consensus which has been reached, not just on the package of sanctions, but on things like the SWIFT payment system as well, and indeed the steps Germany have taken on energy and additional NATO expenditure too. So President Putin, rightly so, is completely sidelined in the world, and I think it will be very interesting to see the pressure of these economic sanctions continue to mount over coming days and weeks, and hopefully that will bring a swift end to what we are seeing in Ukraine.
Catherine, I'm just asking you, when you see the images and you know, you hear the stories, I think 2,000 now dead, at least citizens in Ukraine, and the hundreds of thousands fleeing the country. Just your thoughts, I suppose, nearly a week into this war?
Well, obviously, deeply upset that cancer treatment who are in the basement of a hospital. And there have been deaths of children, which is contrary to any war where civilians are being targeted clearly. Despite Mr. Putin promising that civilians would not be targeted, that it was going to be just a surgical attack on military bases. That's clearly incorrect. Lie after lie from the president of Russia, and any leader who would allow a child to suffer, either through killing a child in war or through allowing children who are suffering cancer to be treated in basements in hospitals, and stopping crucial medication and food and supplies getting through to their families. It's the mind of a monster, and the whole week's been deeply upsetting. And what's wonderful, though, is the UK Parliament that united. I mean, normally Scott and I would be on talking about the things which are different, because obviously we represent different.
OK, Catherine, we're just having a little bit of problems with your sounds. We're going to try and sort that out. But I do want to play a clip that your leader, Keir Starmer, put at Prime Minister's Question Time today about further sanctions on further individuals. Let's have a look.
Mr. Speaker, Roman Abramovich is the owner of Chelsea Football Club and various other high-value assets in the United Kingdom. He's a person of interest to the Home Office because of his links to the Russian state and his public association with corrupt activity and practices. Last week, the Prime Minister said that Abramovich is facing sanctions. He later corrected the record to say that he isn't. Well, why on earth isn't he?
Mr. Speaker, it's not appropriate for me to comment on individual cases at this stage. And it is. But what I can say, and I stand, Mr. Speaker, by what I've said in the House and what we've put on the record. But be in no doubt that the actions that we've already taken, that this House has already taken, are having an effect in Moscow. And by exposing the ownership of properties of companies in the way that we are, by sanctioning 200 275 individuals already, a further 100 last week. The impact is being felt. And what we will publish in addition, Mr. Speaker, is a full list of all those associated with the Putin regime. Of course, we have already announced sanctions on Putin and Lavrov themselves.
Let's go back to Catherine. Sorry, we were struggling with your sound a little bit. I think it is better. But Labour calling for quicker sanctions, particularly on some of these oligarchs who, of course, are recognisable names here in the UK.
Correct. We want to be quicker, and also we want to introduce what we've been calling for since the Russia report came out in 2020, which is for a property register of all those oligarchs who own property, particularly in the London area, but across the UK, so that we can understand where their assets are and they can be frozen, and that money can be returned to the Russian people, because they have stolen money as a result of many of the energy companies privatised in the 90s, and they live the life of Riley while imposing the sort of treatment that they're imposing on Ukrainians today, and that's a deeply unfair situation.
That's a fair point, isn't it, Scott? That, you know, and it's not just Labour. Some of your own MPs are calling for the Prime Minister to go further. That, you know, it's all very good standing up and giving rounds of applause, but that Britain could go further and should.
Well, so far, in conjunction with the US, Britain has led in terms of imposing the largest and most severe sanctions of any nation upon Russia. And of course, that's crippling its economy at the moment, strangling that military-industrial complex as well, which of course Putin will need if he's going to mount a sustained challenge over coming months upon Ukraine. So we have led the world in terms of that. Of course, as Keir Starmer rightly said at Prime Minister's question times today, there is more we can do. He referenced a number of individuals, including Roman Abramovich. I see this afternoon the football club he owns, Chelsea FC, is also up for sale. So I think it's fairly clear. But if we are going to take additional steps and widen that scope of oligarchs and dirty foreign money in the UK and clamping down on those individuals, we need to do that very, very quickly. And I think there is pressure building, not just within Parliament, but especially the Conservative Party, for additional measures to be taken. That Prime Minister has said we will continue to review the sanctions and the individuals upon which they reply every single day. And I think we will see further measures going forward as well.
Catherine, one of the other things the Prime Minister touched upon today as well is that, you know, there is no beef here with the Russian people themselves. In fact, it is the Russians who in many ways are being abused by their own leadership. But we have to also be honest, don't we, that it is to a large degree, ordinary Russians who are going to suffer from these sanctions.
Completely. Not only have they suffered already because so much of the wealth has been taken offshore and is in London, which is called Londongrad, in the Russia report, which is a report from this Parliament regarding these matters, but also obviously in shell companies in the British Virgin Islands and in the Cayman Islands. And the UK is uniquely positioned to press much harder on the sanctions. We've only really sanctioned 8 individuals. And what we need to do is we need to continue that and keep up that robust pressure. Also on Companies House at the moment, you can start a company, the RUSI, which is the one of the think tanks, has come out and said it's just registered a company called Crookedy McCrook with Companies House because there's no ID checks. It's ridiculous the amount of loopholes that there are in our bureaucracy where you just begin a company, you don't have to show any ID, you just make up an address in the UK. That must be tightened up immediately so that we can clamp down, and we are uniquely positioned with our huge financial sector to hit them where it hurts, which is in their back pockets, and to return that money to the Russian people.
OK, and just very finally, Scott, Chris Bryant raised this today, others have done in the past, that there was a sense that Britain did have an obligation to Ukraine, stretching back to the 1990s. The Prime Minister today again saying that, you know, NATO, the UK couldn't get involved in a no-fly zone, it couldn't get involved directly with Russia. Where do you stand on that? Do you think that in many ways the UK militarily should do more, or that in the end we simply cannot afford to get involved in a nuclear war with a leader that at the very least might be willing to go that far?
Well, in addition to the economic sanctions we've already imposed, we're providing huge humanitarian aid. £220 million has been pledged so far, in addition to the military aid we have provided and will continue to provide. The question of so-called boots on the ground or no-fly zone is an interesting one. I personally think the Prime Minister and Defence Secretary have been entirely correct to rule out that as a possibility. Of course, if we do, for example, insist on a no-fly zone, we then have to implement that. And essentially that could and probably would mean engaging in air-to-air combat with Russian forces, firing down, shooting down Russian airplanes. And I'm afraid then that drags the UK and all of NATO into a long and protracted war with Russia. And we've seen also President Putin's comments. I'm sure it was just saber-rattling in terms of using the nuclear option. But I'm afraid we're dealing with an individual here who is obviously barbaric in terms of his actions, has a stranglehold on officials in the Kremlin. And I'm afraid we just don't quite know where this will end. So I think rightly at this stage, the UK have ruled out enforcing a no-fly zone and boots on the ground. I think that's the correct decision, but obviously we will have to monitor events closely over coming weeks and months.
OK, Scott and Catherine, thank you so much indeed for your time this afternoon. Really appreciate it. That is Catherine West, the Labour MP, and Scott Benton, the Conservatives for Blackpool South. OK, it is, coming up to 25 minutes past 3 o'clock on this Wednesday afternoon. Do get in touch, GBViews at gbnews.uk or tweet us at GBNews if you've got a view on this, which I'm sure you do. Coming up next, as you can see, we'll be talking about the SNP equating some of this to Scottish independence, plus that and a lot more in just a couple of minutes. Stay tuned.
My name's Tom Harwood, and every weekday we bring you The Briefing live from 9:30 a.m. The stories, analysis and live debate that you need to hear.
Quite right, Tom, of course.
Was this something that had been considered at all?
Difficult to answer.
Gas-guzzling helicopters circling. Noise is being made here.
Joe Biden walking out. Thank you very much for joining us. Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, Monday to Friday, 9:30 a.m. on GB News.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and every weekday we bring you the briefing live from 9:30 a.m. The stories, analysis, and live debate that you need to hear.
Quite right, Tom, of course.
Was this something that had been considered at all?
Difficult to answer.
Gas guzzling helicopters circling. Noise is being made here.
Joe Biden walking out.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Don't miss it. The briefing with me, Tom Harwood, Monday to Friday, 9:30 a.m. on GB News.
Join me, Gloria De Piero, Monday to Thursday at noon for The Briefing. We go to the parts of Parliament that you won't see elsewhere. Plus, there's exclusive interviews with MPs from all parties.
But quite often, they paper over the real truth. Why does a working class lad like you join the Tories?
That's a good question.
Don't miss it, Monday to Thursdays at noon on GB News.
Very welcome back to the briefing here on GB News. Now, the SNP's president has been condemned after comparing the invasion of Ukraine to the UK government's refusal to agree to a second Scottish independence referendum. Mike Russell, the former Constitution Secretary, drew a series of parallels in a blog for the party's website. This is what he had to say. Nor can that be subscribed by history just because someone or something doesn't mean it will always continue to be so, whether that be rule from Moscow or the result of an 8-year-old referendum. Well, this attempt to create parallels between the struggle of the Ukrainian people and the need for another independence referendum has angered many in Scotland. Joining me to discuss this is the Scottish Conservative MSP, Murdo Fraser. Murdo, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Can we just focus on this comparison? What's been the political reaction in Scotland to it?
Well, as you might expect, people have been shocked and disappointed by these comments. They have been described as crass and unfortunate, and I think that's putting it very mildly. I mean, if you look at the situation in Ukraine, the fact their country has been invaded by an aggressive neighbour, the fact that hundreds of people have already died, including many civilians, that we're seeing what could well end up being war crimes, which could end up being prosecuted. To try and suggest there's any parallel at all between that situation and the relationship that Scotland has with the rest of the United Kingdom is, I think, both crass and outrageous. And no surprise there has been outrage across the political spectrum in Scotland. And it was interesting today that when questioned about this, Nicola Sturgeon, the First Minister of Scotland and the SNP, was very quick to distance herself from our colleagues. You referenced the comments there from Michael Russell. Michael Russell is the President of the SNP. He was until last year a very prominent SNP politician. He was the Constitution Secretary in the Scottish Government and a long-standing SNP member of the Scottish Parliament. And he was joined as well by another SNP MSP, Michelle Thompson, who had tweeted something very similar about how Ukraine should give an inspiration to people in Scotland and the independence movement. So it's not just one isolated example, it's more than one SNP politician and more than one causing upset. And to her credit, Nicola Sturgeon has done her best to try and distance herself and the SNP leadership from these comments.
Yeah, I think Michelle Thompson retweeted a tweet that said, "Delighted for Ukraine. It just goes to show what political will can achieve. Remember this Scotland." I mean, are you calling essentially for people to resign here or just to retract the comments?
Well, I think what we're really saying is they should reflect upon the comments and retract them. To her credit, Michelle Thompson has deleted the tweet in which she made those comments, and she has apologised for them. I don't know if she was lent on by the SNP High Command, but she did retreat. No sign so far of Michael Russell apologising or retreating from his comments. I hope he will. Of course, part of the context for this is that there is a degree of discomfort in SNP circles. Going back to the 2014 independence referendum, it's been well recorded, I think, that there was undoubtedly Russian interference in the 2014 independence referendum, certainly in terms of activity on social media, and evidence that a House of Commons Select Committee highlighted that there was Russian pressure in the 2014 referendum on the side of the pro-independence movement. And that perhaps wouldn't surprise us. I mean, clearly, if you were Putin looking to weaken one of your strongest rivals on the world stage, you would want to see the United Kingdom break up. And of course, on top of that, we've had the former SNP leader and former First Minister of Scotland, Alex Salmond, who's been hosting a show on Russia Today,
indeed,
the Russian state TV, for the last number of years.
Okay, and just finally, Murdo, while we've got you, you called and have called repeatedly for Boris Johnson to resign as Prime Minister. Should he?
I think the situation we're now in as a country is not the right time to be looking for a new Prime Minister. We're in a very different situation from the one when we were in a few weeks ago. I felt at that time that the Prime Minister's conduct fell below the level that one would expect. I haven't changed my mind on that, but I do think the circumstances we are now in require a degree of stability. So for now, I think the Prime Minister should remain in his position.
So he should still resign, just not now?
Well, I don't think he should be resigning now. And who knows at what point we will get to when we get back to some degree of normality. I don't think it's helpful to speculate on that. I think for now, we need the quality of leadership which Boris Johnson has shown. And, I've been a critic of his. I think he's done very, very well over the past couple of weeks in leading the Western world's reaction to what's happened in Russia and standing up against Putin. So credit to him for that.
Okay, Murdo Fraser, as always, thank you very much indeed for joining us from Hollywood there. You're watching GB News. Let's bring you up to date with the latest news. Here's Rosie.
It's 3:35. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. The Prime Minister has told the Commons Russia's actions in Ukraine fully qualify as a war crime. Ahead of Prime Minister's questions, Ukraine's ambassador to the UK, who was watching proceedings, was welcomed with a standing ovation. Boris Johnson praised Ukraine and its citizens for their resolve. He also said he told the President, Volodymyr Zelensky, that the UK will do everything it can to accelerate the delivery of weapons.
Mr. Speaker, with the continued heroism and resolve of the Ukrainian people, which is so amazing that we've seen over the last few days, and with the unity of the West that we are seeing, which I think has also taken aback President Putin, I've no doubt at all, Mr. Speaker, that he will fail and that we will succeed in protecting Ukraine.
In Ukraine, the State Emergency Service says more than 2,000 civilians have been killed since the start of the Russian invasion. Hundreds of structures, including transport facilities, hospitals, kindergartens and homes, have also been destroyed. The World Health Organization says Ukrainians may face imminent shortages of cancer medicines and insulin. The UN's Refugee Agency says more than 874,000 people have fled from Ukraine to neighbouring countries since the conflict began. Most of them have gone to Poland, which has taken in almost 500,000 refugees. Companies have also been taking action against Russia. US airplane manufacturer Boeing has suspended parts and maintenance for the country's airlines. Google has blocked mobile apps connected to news channels RT and Sputnik. Apple has halted the sale of its products and restricted its map services. Ford has also interrupted operations. You're up to date here on GB News. We'll do the same for the rest of the day. We're on your TV, online and DAB Plus radio. Shortly, we'll be back to the briefing with Darren.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Very welcome back to GB News, coming up to 20 minutes to 4 o'clock on this Wednesday afternoon, on TV, online and on your radio. I'm sure some of you got views on that Scotland story, the equivalence with what's happening in Ukraine. Do get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk. We'll get some of views a little later on in the programme. But first, as you can see at the bottom of your screen, we've got a GB News exclusive ahead of tomorrow's by-election. Let's cross over to our political correspondent, Tom Harwood.
The people of Birmingham Erdington vote for a new MP on Thursday in a poll following the sudden death of respected Labour MP Jack Dromey. The frontrunner among the 12 candidates to replace him is Labour's Paulette Hamilton. Her party has held the seat since 1945. Well, today GB News can reveal we have uncovered some interesting past comments of Hamilton's, which she made in 2015. Speaking at an event entitled "The Ballot or the Bullet? Does your vote count?" Hamilton appeared alongside the controversial race academic Kehinde Andrews and made a number of eyebrow-raising comments about the value of democracy. First, let's turn to the views that appear to suggest she is torn between the democratic system and what she calls an uprising.
So you talk about the bullet or the vote. I'm not sure. Although I believe in the vote and I believe in our right to use that vote or destroy that vote, I'm not sure that we will get what we really deserve in this country using the vote. But I don't know if we are a strong enough group to get what we want to get. If we have an uprising, I think we will be quashed in such a way we could lose a generation of our young people. So I am very torn. I went away and watched the Malcolm X film to make sure, and listened to a lot of what he'd said to make sure I was ready.
Now, Malcolm X was a divisive figure in the American civil rights movement, accused of supporting violence in the otherwise noble cause of racial justice. So that's quite a statement. But perhaps more interesting is what she said a few minutes later at the same panel event. In making a point about political representation, Hamilton made an interesting comparison. A year after the so-called Trojan horse scandal broke, Hamilton also talked about infiltration, of taking over governorships, changing head teachers, and inserting religio-political views into those schools that were taken over. This is what she said.
We had Trojan horse in the council. Our Muslim brothers and sisters, for many, many years, you know, there were things out there saying that they had made a plan about how they were going to try and not integrate, but ensure that their teachings and what have you got into the system. What then happened was many of the schools, inner city schools in Birmingham, certain schools, the Muslim families, they filled the schools, they then ensured that they took over the governorships. They took over the governorships. As they took over the governorships, they made sure that the heads of those schools were people that they wanted to represent their cause. What they then did with doing all of this, it made sure that their religious views and their beliefs were taken through the education system. It was also then taken into politics. We have large numbers of Muslim councillors. We've got 2 MPs in this city that look after the needs, well, they don't, but they're supposed to look after the needs of a community. What has happened is they've got into positions of power and they've forgotten the reason they were put there in the first place. The problem with our community, we're not even on the map.
Now, later in the discussion, when talking about increasing representation, Hamilton went on to say, quote, "I know that we want something of our own, but sometimes you have to infiltrate other systems if you want to get change." Now, finally, Hamilton discussed the ways in which people can vote. She described how postal votes are used among some ethnic minority communities.
The postal vote is the way some of our ethnic minority communities actually lock it down. Because what they do is old families just have the postal vote. Whoever comes in says, vote this one, tick, postal vote goes back, and in one household you can have 8 votes and it's on lockdown.
Now, Hamilton's comments were made in 2015 during a 2-hour panel discussion hosted by the Organisation of Black Unity. A Labour Party spokesman said, "Paulette Hamilton is arguing for better representation for the black community in public life, and as she is campaigning to become Birmingham's first black MP, she has a point." Now, on the Trojan horse comments, the Labour spokesperson said, "These comments were made 2 years before the full facts of the case were known, and so are clearly out of date." Miss Hamilton's Conservative rival, on the other hand, Robert Alden, said, "I'm sure many people will find these comments attributed to the Labour candidate shocking and concerning." Now, we also approached the Liberal Democrat candidate for a response, but one was not provided. Voters in Erdington head to the polls tomorrow, and there are 12 candidates on the ballot paper, which you can see on your screen now. Polling stations close at 10 p.m. tomorrow, and we should know who has won by the early hours of Friday morning. For those listening on the radio, these candidates are available on GB News social media.
Tom, thank you very much indeed. Tom Horwood, our political correspondent. Now, the United Nations has said that over 800,000 people have now fled Ukraine since the Russian invasion, with the European Union. With that number could rise, that the EU saying could rise to 4 million. The majority of those who have fled so far have gone to Ukraine's immediate neighbours. They include Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, Bulgaria, Romania, and of course Moldova. Well, join me now from the Moldovan capital is Frank Elbers, who's a journalist based there. Frank, thank you very much indeed for joining us. These are incredibly large numbers. Just give us a sense of what you're seeing there in Moldova.
Today, it's been 7 days that the invasion started by the Russians in Ukraine. And ever since, people have started moving. And I've been actually moving along the borders of Romania and Moldova, who are directly bordering on the south of Ukraine. And what you see now, and this is very little, has received very little attention so far in the international media, is that Moldova, which is the size of Wales, it's actually a little smaller, has now the same number as Hungary. So over 100,000 people have crossed into Moldova in the past 7 days. It's a little less for Romania. And we're now at a tipping point where of those 12,000 people that have come in, about 51,000 are still in the country, in this tiny country, which is very organized around the capital city, Chisinau. And people are waiting out. There are incredible efforts by Moldovan citizens. They're driving to the border crossings. You can see this once people come through. They will be picked up by volunteer taxis. There are literally hundreds of people waiting there to bring them to the capital. So that's worked really, really well. And there are more. There are several border crossings. There's one on the west. And there's one big one at the east near Odessa. very close to Ukraine, only 50 kilometers.
And just, sorry to interrupt, and we're looking at some pictures here of those migrants crossing over that border, and as you say, putting an awful lot of pressure on what is a relatively small country. I just also, Frank, want to ask about the public view there in Moldova, particularly in Transnistria, where there is essentially a large Russian supporting population, if I can put it that way. What is the public view of what is happening in Ukraine amongst ordinary Moldovans?
In Ukraine? You mean in Tiraspol, in the Transnistria? That's really a tiny sliver of the of Moldova, so that's not so much an issue. Generally, there are two concerns. The Moldovans are concerned that they are so close to Odessa. And that also affects the waves of people that are coming in more and more on foot. The temperatures are dropping. It's been snowing today. And so that is the sort of the background. But at the moment, the southern city of Kherson, which is very close, relatively close to Odessa, has been supposedly been captured by the Russians, and that really makes that people very fearful. And the fact that there is this very small sliver, Transnistria, where there's still Soviet troops from 30 years ago when the Soviet Union collapsed, is not so much of an issue. The second concern here is really...
Sorry, Frank, we haven't got much... Sorry, I don't want to... We haven't got much time. What I'm trying to get at, I suppose, my question is, Moldova's got an EU-supporting prime minister. As you say, it's got some Russian... I mean, is there a fear in Moldova that after Ukraine, Moldova could be next in terms of a Russian invasion?
No. The European Commission and has been very supportive. In fact, just the President Sandu of Moldova finished a press conference with the EU Representative Foreign Affairs, Josep Borrell. They've been sending aid. They just promised 15 million euros in aid, and Moldova can manage. It's just that the country has a lot of refugees that want to move on. There's a no-fly zone, and the borders are very small with neighboring Romania, which is really the main way out of this country.
Frank, really appreciate your time. That's Frank Elbers there joining us from Moldova this afternoon. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Frank. Well, let's move finally to the United States, because last night President Joe Biden gave his State of the Union address to Congress, in which the president showed solidarity with the people of Ukraine, telling Americans that democracies are rising to the moment, and lauded the West's sanctions against Russia. He also pledged to tackle soaring energy costs as a result of the crisis. So what should we make of Joe Biden's speech and his administration's response to the Ukraine crisis? Delighted to say, joining me now from Washington, D.C., is the president's former chief of staff when he was in the Senate. That is Susan Platt. Susan, thank you so much indeed for joining us. What did you make of the speech last night?
Thank you, Darren, for having me. I thought it was a very strong speech. I thought he opened and closed with the strength of purpose, strength of leadership, and strength of unity. He talked about the unity of NATO and his unity agenda for America. And he told us we were going to be okay, that we are stronger than we were last year. We're going to be stronger next year. And even many Republicans found many things to agree with and stand and applaud. He referenced Ukrainian President Zelensky's speech that light will win over darkness. And the Ukrainians are fighting fearlessly and with great determination. And Biden stressed, now is the time to save democracy. And I think that's what a lot of Americans feel. And I think that's obviously what NATO feels as well.
Just in terms of what you think the administration's view are, indeed ordinary Americans, is this viewed as a worldwide problem, partly an American problem, or is it viewed very much as a European problem, with the Americans kind of coming up from the rear, as President Obama would have put it?
Well, I think we view it as a worldwide problem, and it is an American problem. I do believe that Joe Biden's experience with bringing all of our allies together and defending every inch of NATO-owned land is important to all of us, because if we don't, as he said last night, if you don't stop people on this right from the start, they take more and more and more. And I think we all want to be able to choose where our countries stand, what our democracies are, and how we're going to live. And I will tell you, I think Joe Biden stressed unity, strength of purpose, and leadership. As he talked about Ukraine and the world stage and NATO coming together, he also talked about the United States coming together. And that's something that I think a lot of Americans really want to have happen now. Let's get rid of the mean girls and the way these antics that we have with some of these folks in Congress, and let's talk more about our domestic agenda. You know, he talked about the economy created over 6.5 million new jobs in America last year, more jobs created in 1 year than ever before. He talked about how we need to begin fixing 65,000 miles of highway that we funded, how we need to combat inflation by buying American goods, by doing more to help. So that's why I think it's important that we talk about coming together as a whole.
But the point is that may all well be true, but people who may well be losing their jobs this November are Democrats Congress people, because Joe Biden's poll ratings are still really, really bad.
Well, let's remember, we've just come through a pandemic where we're all tired. We're exhausted. We're depressed. We want to move on. We want to turn the page, but nothing happens overnight. It takes some time. And remember that polls, as you know, are just a snapshot in time. And I do believe, beginning today when he travels to Minnesota and the vice president traveled to the South, we will begin talking about the good things we've done and how we all can come together. And that's where it is important to talk about NATO and unity of purpose, and America and unity of purpose, how we all can come together. We're all tired of all the fighting and bickering. We all want to move on with better lives. And that's where I think it's important.
Really appreciate your time this afternoon. That's Susan Platt there joining us from Washington, D.C. Thank you so much indeed for joining us. Lots of you have been getting in touch. GBViews at gbnews.uk on Ukraine. Alan is saying that Boris and Biden need to go now. We need strong leadership at this time that will stand up to Putin and fast, because if he gets away with it, what will he do next? Lynn has said what an absolute hero and brave man the Ukrainian president is and his people. Surely to God, this is there is more that we could do. Now, that is leadership. And Christine on the SNP comment says, as usual, the SNP will jump on any bandwagon to keep their independence drive in the news, but conflating their mission with the appalling and tragic situation in Ukraine is the lowest of the low. There was, we were mocking Nicola Sturgeon, and we asked the SNP for comment, but she has distanced herself from those comments. OK, that is it from me for today. I'm back again, of course, at 3 tomorrow. Tom is here at 9:30, Gloria at 12. Up next, though, it's Colin Brazier with Brazier 4 to 6 on GB News. That's all after today's weather. I'll see you tomorrow.
Hi there, I'm Aidan McGivern. The far north is dry and bright this afternoon, and it will stay dry at first this evening, but gloomy, damp elsewhere. That cloud and rain spreading north across the country because of these weak weather fronts, but they are introducing an awful lot of low cloud, hill fog, outbreaks of light rain and drizzle, and that weather reaches the north of Scotland through the evening, just about avoiding the Northern Isles until after midnight. So it's a gloomy night for most. Those outbreaks of rain and drizzle continuing, becoming more persistent for western parts of the country during the early hours. Perhaps some clear spells in the far southeast and later for Northern Ireland as well. But in between, with the extensive cloud and rain, temperatures staying up between 7 and 9 Celsius. And so it is another dull and damp start to the day for many, especially western Scotland, northwest England, Wales and the southwest. This is a slow-moving area of cloud and rain, and it will be brighter either side of it. So for parts of eastern England, for Northern Ireland, western Scotland, some sunshine coming through. Mild in the southeast, 13 Celsius for London, 8 to 10 where it's raining in the middle, and something a bit colder there, 8 or 9 for Northern Ireland and western Scotland later. But the front slowly makes its way east on Thursday night into the start of Friday. A damp night to come, I think, for central areas. But either side, some clear spells for East Anglia, Wales, southwest England, Northern Ireland, western Scotland. I think mostly frost-free, however, because of the fairly extensive cloud cover. perhaps a touch of frost in the west first thing if we see clear enough skies overnight. A few showers, though, following for Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, Wales and the southwest. The cloudy and damp zone pushes into eastern parts of the country through much of Friday. Then it peters out through the weekend, so most places turning drier and brighter.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube. You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories.